So, we're back in the world of Rebel Moon, aka Snyder Unchained, and while I can't say I was excited to watch the second part after reviewing the first, I was happy to have the Grain Saga over and done with. Or so I thought. In honor of my Child of Fire review, this review will also be in yes or no format, giving you a rundown of what I do and don't like. And if the trailer is any indication of what I'm in for, with its use of that no mercy soundbite that didn't sound mixed well at all, the no's will be strong with this one. Welcome to Stream Come True, where nothing is spoiler-free. So the film starts with narration. Have you gotten tired of me saying that yet? And Tony of Hopkins recaps the story thus far. While the recap ran a bit long for my taste, I still give it a yes. It stuck to what's relevant, led nicely into the first scene, and I appreciate Anthony's elevated pronunciation of everything that didn't sound that way before. Gunner, you say? He's Guna now. So we're back on the King's Gaze, where His Holiness himself, Admiral Noble, is being re-grossified. And I like the domineering way Commander Cassius enters the room, played by Alfonso Herrera, who is arguably one of Latin America's widely known talents. Not most widely known like you'd expect that to say, just widely known, and arguably. Now a few quick yeses and nos happen all at once, so I'll barrel through them. No to these Metal Gear Solid looking ass graphics. Yes to electricity shooting everywhere except where it should be. No to this shot for teaching those of us with perfect vision how the other half lives. And yes to Noble looking like he had the most intense K-beauty facial when emerging from the chrysalis. Because being brought back from the dead is no excuse for dry skin. So Cassius informs our freshly hydrated Noble that they've been parked outside Gondoval waiting for him to recover, to which Noble responds that the Scargiver's on Velt. And that's a no. Because unless I forgot the first film, which is entirely possible given the amount of bad it was, this is the first time Noble's ever referred to Cora by that name, and he said it like it's a name Cassius knows. Imagine that your friend says, she's at McDonald's. So you say, who's at McDonald's and why does she have bad taste? And they say, the spot treater. If there's no one that you call the spot treater, it'd be weird your friend put it that way. Telling Cassius the Scargiver is on Velt only makes sense if she were given that moniker due to some backstory they've yet to reveal that Cassius is privy to. And I have a feeling it's not that, so he could have just called her Arthaleus, the name she was given by Belarus when he brought her into the fold, since she was pretty well known by that. But fine. So Noble tells Cassiopeia to make way for Velt, and we cut to our intrepid warriors returning to the farm on their not horses. All of our favorites are back. Cozy Den, Haagen-Dazs Hagen, and Water Girl Sam with no water in sight. Oh, they grow up so fast. But this scene is a no, because when Hagen and Den step out to greet the party, the way it's directed makes it seem like Hagen is talking to Cora and Gunner, which wouldn't make sense.
I'm Hagen. This is Den. We welcome you to our humble village. You must be tired and hungry.
Who are you looking at, sir? And why are y'all peering off into the distance? Can we get a reaction shot from the strangers actually being spoken to, please? Why cut to this medium shot of Cora and Gunner in the foreground with the characters being addressed blurred in the background? That should have at least been a wide shot showing the entire group, with the newbies giving little nods or smiles. I also didn't like that they cut back to that medium close-up of Hagen and Den because it felt too samey and claustrophobic, not welcoming at all. And I know that may seem like a nitpick, but to be fair to me, shut up about it. Zack did this, not I. So the crew heads to the Longhouse, and we cut to Water Girl Sam and her soldier boy Aris, played by Sky Yang to my Earth Ying, who's being a Debbie Downer about their prospects of defeating the Imperium for some reason, and who captured Bill Cipher in a jar. The jar starts beeping, and Aris flippity-flops some switches on a boombox that turns out to be a communicator. Cassius is calling in to see what's what. And this is a maybe no, because Aris is a rookie grunt, and unless the Imperium handles chain of command differently, which they don't, I imagine Cassius would want a report from a superior officer, not a random soldier. So it's awfully convenient that he didn't ask to speak to someone else, given that the only reason Aris answered is because all of the other soldiers are dead. But you could argue that Cassius didn't ask questions on purpose to not let on that he knows something is wrong. Because while he does tell Aris they're coming in 5 days, alerting him to the fact that they'll be coming in guns blazing could undermine the attack. Also, Jimmy's doing great. But I gotta ask, what's he scanning for? I get why he scanned the guns, and I get why he scanned Cora. But why you scanning the grass, Jimmy? You're feral now. That's your home. Now, here is where we encounter the biggest no I didn't address in the first film, but can't avoid addressing in this one. The grain. And I know it's early in the video, but let's head into the dark place. Not once in A Child of Fire did they show evidence of the Imperium's army being desperate for food. There were no waning troops unable to fight due to starvation, no stories about battles lost because they lacked the supplies. We were just told that the Motherworld's resources were depleted, and Noble just demanded Velt's grain for his men. But I let it slide because two things can be true at once. It can be true that they're in need of food, while also being true that they don't need it yet. And the grain felt more like a MacGuffin, a catalyst for the plot, not the plot itself. So if they make the grain the focus in this one, I'm gonna have words for old Zack. And if you're wondering why I don't know if it is, I suppose it's as good a time as any to explain my videos. For these non-essay style reviews, I don't watch the movie then write a script. I watch the movie and write down exactly what I'm thinking as I go. So all I know about the film is whatever I've seen so far, and whatever I've seen so far has me concerned. So the crew is gathered in the Longhouse, which is oddly devoid of townsfolk, and Den explains that they hid from the crew out of shame that they need strangers to fight their battles for them. I give that a no because it's silly. One person, feeling weak and powerless, refusing to show his face to the people who remind him of that inadequacy, I get. But a whole town? These are grown-ass men and women. They need to get over it. But I admit that it's so silly, I almost want to give it a yes for being distinct. Personally, I'd rather Den be the no-show with all the other villagers there, making it more intimate when Cora asks where he is, and Hagen explains how he feels. There'd also be an added layer of jealousy, with Gunnar being the one who fought alongside the crew, even saved Cora's life, while all Den's done so far is exist. But they already dropped the ball on the rival love interest thing in the first film. I understand that it's not something they're trying to explore. I just want Den's character built out more and to have more purpose. As for the villagers, I do give it a yes that they offer the crew food and drink rather than offering to help, because it's consistent with their nature and Child of Fire. They basically said, listen, we can't fight, but we can farm. Our weapon is the cold hard steel of agriculture. So I like that they weren't running around eager to join the battle, I just don't like that they hid. So Den explains why everyone's missing, and Furiosa, played by Elise Duffy, says words. And I know her name isn't Furiosa, it's Milius, which I learned from the narration when Hopkins listed everybody off, and I said, who the hell is... oh... But I refuse to call her that because if they didn't see fit to give her character a proper introduction, I'll call her whatever I like. And I like Furiosa, Wingardium Leviosa. Anyway, none of that matters because Cora gives Den and Hagen the good news that no one has to worry about fighting because Noble is dead.
Really?
You might need to say it again, he doesn't believe it. He's dead.
You alright there, Gunnar? And it's protocol for the troops to return to the Motherworld when an admiral dies because they're not allowed to do their thing without one. So all's well that ends well, I guess. Except yo-ho! Aris steps in with the bad news. The Dreadnought is coming in 5 days. And I thought it was funny that after he said that, Gunnar asked Sam if it's true. Like, I'm sorry, do you think Soldier Boy is lying? And if he is, would Sam say so right in front of him? But this throws Cora for a loop. Why are they coming if Noble is dead? And there's a yes, no, yes back to back. Yes to Titus saying that death doesn't stand in the way of the Motherworld. No to him then saying they must need grain worse than he could have known because absolutely not. You don't get to say that. We haven't seen that. And you could have known that had they shown that. That is what I call a Rebel Moon rap. And yes, because he tells Hagen to round up the villagers, which suits his role as the general. Bonus yes for flowy pants and flappy cloaks. With the gang all here, Titus gives everyone a pep talk about the days ahead. And we have another quick no-yes pair. No to the way this child forces his way to the front, because forced is precisely what it is, but yes for cutting from the child to Nemesis blades before panning up to her reflective face. Because we do know from the first film that her children were killed, sending her on a murder spree. So I appreciate the visual connection, and wouldn't be surprised if she ends up having to protect that child during the battle in a way that she wasn't able to protect her own. Speaking of which, where are the children? I didn't see any in the town in the first film and thought it was weird, but the fact that there's one kid now makes the lack of other kids stand out more. Maybe they'll address that later, but it's not important. What is important is Titus's speech, because he says something that confirms my fears about the grain.
In time, we will teach you how to fight. But first, you must show us your strength, the way of the land.
Okay. So they're sticking to the plan laid out in A Child of Fire of farming real good to bring in the harvest as promised, lest they be kings gazed into oblivion. And I'm fine with that in theory, it's the execution I'm worried about. But there's no time for worry because Gunnar and Cora kissy kiss, then do some farming of their own in the sack. And I don't mean of grain, though it's likely made from the same material, they don't have much. And while it's arguably the best and worst time to broach the subject, it's a solid yes for Gunnar asking Cora why Noble called her the most wanted criminal in the universe. Because we finally get a flashback of what happened on the day the king was slain. And I have to give credit where it's due, I haven't seen any needless slow motion yet and we're 20 minutes in. But the flashback could have used more of that slick Snydering because it was rough. I hesitate to say this without giving the film more time to hit its stride, but everything that was good in A Child of Fire, namely most of the acting, the editing, and a decent chunk of the visuals, is gone here. It's like someone said, here's an idea. Instead of improving Snyder's writing, let's just worsen everything else. You know, homogenize the bad. And I know there are co-writers and other cooks in the kitchen, but you won't convince me that anything I'm seeing happened against Snyder's will. He's the director, the cinematographer, a producer. This is his child, so I hold him accountable for its genetics. Now, I don't like being negative for long stretches, it bums me out, so for this scene, let's get all the no's out of the way as quickly as possible. Frafi and Cary Elwes were terrible in this scene, to a comical degree, though Frafi was worse, and I don't get it. I've watched Cary Elwes for years. He's a great actor, and I really liked Frafi in Hawkeye and in A Child of Fire. I also made peace with the fact that his hair and makeup looked less like an older gentleman and more like a young man mid-transformation into a lycanthrope. But unlike the princess, I can't forgive what happened here.
Do it. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for, child? Do it! Do it. No. Do it. Kill her.
What is his voice doing? It's like Hunnam in the first film when he was whispering in Gunner's ear, do it, do it. Do it is bad dialogue unless it's used sparingly to great effect. I know Snyder has a thing for Star Wars, but Belisarius isn't Emperor Palpatine, and even he only said it once. I also don't know what accent Frafi is using because I don't remember him sounding like that in A Child of Fire. Maybe that's how they sound in the part of Ireland he's from, Dungannon, which I assume is pronounced like Kilcannon because it's delicious in County Tyrone, Northern Letitia. But let me back up. As the story goes, the princess was so healing and pure that she softened the king's heart, and he turned away from the warmongering conqueror lifeblood of the motherworld in favor of peace. But Belisarius wanted none of it. So when the royals came to christen what was meant to be the last ever dreadnought, Belisarius ambushed them instead, killing the king and queen, then telling Cora to kill the princess. So he's sitting there saying, "Do it, kill her," and the king who's dying in his arms is like, "No, don't kill her." And while we don't see Cora fire the gun directly, the princess says, "I forgive you," before Cora says don't and seems to fire. Then all that divine light pops out of Issa's belly before she falls down dead. Then in an utterly bizarre performance for the sake of no one, since everyone just saw what happened and was already in on it, Belisarius turns on Cora and says she's the assassin, an off-worlder, a cancer of ethnic impurities, you know, in case we forget these are space Nazis. Which, honestly, if you're that obsessed with purity, work at a water treatment plant. So Cora blasts her way out of there, though not before attempting to shoot Belisarius in the face, only to find herself out of ammo. Now I gotta say for the record that Sophia's performance has consistently been the highlight in these films. It just couldn't save this scene. Apart from the iffy acting, which included the princess, because the reactions were jarring in how exaggerated and disparate they were, though I attribute that more to the editing than the young actress, the editing, speaking of, was Greta Garbo. Most shots went on too long, the sequence of the shots wasn't great, and there were shots that should have been removed entirely, so the whole thing needed to be tightened up. The shots themselves were also poorly composed, and the blocking felt sloppy with minimal visual intent. There were so many shots like this one where Snyder could have done something stylish and fresh, and he didn't. It's like he reined in the parts of himself that weren't the problem. It does look like we're watching this through one of those curved security mirrors at least, which is a creative choice. It just doesn't work. And the music, while great, didn't fit the tone. Having a bunch of folks with embroidered sacks over their heads basically score the action in front of them feels like more of a Kingsman sort of thing than a Rebel Moon sort of thing. It was silly, a word I've used twice now that I shouldn't have needed once, but I concede that all of this is just my personal preference. You might not agree with me at all. So what I'm saying is that for me, everything in this scene converged to a singularity. A point of infinite, I can't take this seriously. And I don't blame anyone but Zack. Because while any good actor can have a bad take, even a bad film, it's part of a director's job to mitigate that, and I feel like Snyder didn't. Nevertheless, I did like the shot of Cora whipping around with the gun and how visceral it was when the doors opened and she lit those guards up, and I liked Issa's expression when she fell back, along with the way that was framed. I was also tickled in a good way this time by the shot of a shuttle arriving as Cora's escaped, because whoever's showing up now is in for a treat. Speaking of treats, I need to grab a snack, so it's time for an intermission. Why don't you like the video, ambush some dessert, and go twerk in the yard while saying, "Do it." Everyone good? Good. Returning to Gunner's sack, I loved Cora's delivery of the line that she's trying to be more than a weapon. Now it's farming time and we're back to the slow motion shots of grain, but you know what? Zack can have this one. It didn't overstay its welcome, the song was pretty, and I liked that the montage ended with Soldier Boy Aris and Water Girl Sam making googly eyes at each other as the wheat rained down around them. I apologize, by the way, if you can hear my fan, it's very hot. Cut to the King's Gaze, where Noble is acting a fool because he wants to get back to work. And I enjoy Ed's acting, so he's also a highlight for me in these films. But the Scargiver thing is a no because I was right. He didn't call Cora that because of some cool backstory. He called her that because she gave him a scar. And it's silly. And that's 3 times I've said it now, and you're also not Jesus, Noble. Stop it. Back to Velt with these drunk-ass birds and more slow-motion farming, which I won't give a yes this time. It's enough. Though I do appreciate that it looks like Nemesis just threw this shit in her own face. And hark! The child I said she'll have to protect or something is bringing her joy. I'm sure that'll turn out fine for everyone involved. And it's a yes, especially since Duna Bay's been woefully underutilized. It's another yes to Titus swapping out booze for H2O, though I'd think him not to stick his hand directly in the barrel like a grossy gross. And no to a slow-motion long shot, Zack. It's weird. Also, I'll exchange my maybe no from earlier for a yes, because we get another call from Cassius, who does ask Aris about the senior officers this time. And while Aris thinks he's still pulling a fast one, Noble puts 2 and 2 together that these soldiers are dead and that Aris is a cutie traitor butt. More grain, more no, some yes that Furiosa gets a moment. It's not much, but it's something. Now it's Tarek's turn for a moment of his own, and putting a shirt on him doesn't count. So we're back in the Longhouse, and Water Girl Sam, who upgraded to level 4 seamstress Sam, made detailed tapestries for the crew. When she had time to do that, let alone to learn enough about them to customize each piece to their individual personalities, even we haven't seen yet, is anybody's guess. But she also made one for Gunner, because he's their heart, and that'll be a no for me, friend. Lest we forget, he's the guy who got your leader killed and promised your food to the enemy. As far as I'm concerned, not getting his ass beat is gift enough. For the record, Den also has one of these, and I'm not sure why. Did he get one before and just happen to have it in the scene, or was something cut out? And why does his have wheat on it? Gunner should have the one with wheat since he loves giving it away so much. And of course, Cora gets one for being their guardian, so I'll give the scene a yes overall because it's sweet. Finally, it's party time in the Longhouse, and everyone's getting their groove on just like old times. Titus sings something meaningful, not gonna lie. Kinda kill the mood. I would have preferred if he was sitting outside looking over the land while singing, or even if he started singing later in the film during a moment in battle that felt hopeless, but I'm okay with it. I also think Jaimon's acting is back to normal in this one, and I'm glad because I like him as an actor. Jimmy! It's Jimmy, everybody! Looking super fucking creepy, and I love it. 10 yeses always. Now it's time to prep for battle, and it's a yes to this montage. No ridiculous slow motion, some character development, and my favorite no-name villager is back. I actually said to myself, what happened to the one I called Natalie Dormer? And there she is. That's a yes for familiar faces. Moving on, we can skip most of this because you've seen its ilk before. Seasoned veterans teaching plebs how to fight, it is what it is, though I would like to know why the guns fire like this.
Like a professional.
Is it, Titus? Is it just like a professional? No wonder they keep running out of ammo. So they go to recover the crashed ship that Cora escaped in to try to restore it. And Jimmy! What are you doing, Jimmy? You may have gone feral, but your arms still work. Either help them with the shuttle or leave. But they get the ship flying. Then Titus calls a square table with the crew and says, look, if we're gonna be fighting together, we gotta dump some exposition. So he proceeds to tell his backstory. And I give that a yes, because how he fell from grace as a general for the Motherworld directly ties into the trust and expectations of those who choose to follow him now. I also give Furiosa's story a yes because it piggybacks off Titus's regret about surrender and explains her bond with Darien Bloodaxe. But they keep going, and while I wanted to know Nemesis' story, which was hands down the most unique, or should I say hands off, it didn't naturally flow from Furiosa's, though I do see where they were trying to go, and Tarek's didn't flow from Nemesis at all. So it made it even more apparent that the sole purpose of this scene was to catch up on all the character introduction and development they didn't bother doing in Child of Fire. Still, I'm giving this exposition powwow a yes, because while all of their stories could have been lightly parsed out in the first film, or better spread out between the two, the fact is that they weren't. So the question now is how best to get it done here. Since the visuals of each backstory are, in my opinion, integral to the style and tone of storytelling established by the first film, and that's been sorely lacking in this one, to be honest, I think those stories shouldn't be shared without them. And if each backstory is going to have those visuals, having them sprinkled throughout the film might compromise the pacing of the scenes they're dropped into without feeling any less info-dumpy. At best, it would be like Korra's flashbacks in Child of Fire, only instead of one continuous story we keep going back to, it would be 4 completely different ones. And while that could work, I don't trust that it would, given the spottiness of the writing as is. So I'd argue that given where we are now, and the kind of story Rebel Moon is meant to be, you might as well stick them all in the same scene to isolate them from impacting the rest of the film, and choose a moment that works narratively and emotionally, which the eve of battle does. Simply put, while everyone spilling their tea around a table or a campfire is an easy way out, I'm fine with it here. It also put their most authentic deliveries on display in a way that benefits the group versus anyone else being the receiver. I give it a yes for Korra continuing to lie about her past despite everyone bearing their truths, because it would have felt out of character if she didn't, and while Nemesis had the coolest backstory, Tarek had the coolest world. So we're halfway into the film now, and the King's Gaze arrives in orbit. Korra hides her recovered shuttle 1,000 miles from the village for some reason, and she runs into Jimmy, who's still reluctant to fight, so off he goes again, being useless. Now the battle is about to start, with the baddies heading down to the surface, farting out so much smoke, and that's a yes, because as I explained in my Fire review, I like sci-fi pew-pew. Korra cutting her hair is no. It happens way too often in films, women chopping their locks before a fight, though in this case, Korra at least has the excuse of maybe wanting to face the mother world the way that she left it. I see now that those tapestries were banners, so that's a nice touch, and a big yes to Korra and Gunner's coconuts for walking out and meeting Noble face to face. It's a galactic no, however, to Noble baring his chest and saying a scar from the Scargiver herself. What the hell does that mean? If she's the Scargiver for giving him the scar, then of course it's a scar from her. Why say it like she was the Scargiver before that, and he's just another place that she left one? Pick, Snyder. Pick. But the rest of their exchange is very yes, and triple yes for the way everything pops off. I talk a lot of smack about Gunner, but he brought me some excitement today. Now we get a lot of yeses back to back. Yes for Noble hopping in the trench and wrecking fools, and yes for Den finally getting his moment. I wanted more physicality from him, and I got that with him fighting Noble hand to hand and actually matching his strength for a while, except that he shouldn't have because he's gone now. More swordplay with Nemesis is a yes, but the editing is no. They did the same thing with her spider fight in the first film, where they made it less dynamic by using slower choreography and longer shots. Only here they used excessive slow motion that turned what would have been fine into slower choreography and longer shots. It's a no for how Korra and Gunner got onto the King's Gaze, because on one hand, I liked the plan, but on the other hand, it's weird that the Imperium would be able to remote pilot her ship without realizing it isn't one of the ships that came with them. Surely there's a unique identifier that allows them to control specific ships, and if there is, you're telling me they didn't track them? All that fancy retro-futuristic equipment and nothing could detect that this ship didn't belong? Or even better, that it's the same fucking ship Arthaleus escaped on 2 seasons ago? Never mind that I haven't seen a single female piloting them, yet they hear a lady voice on the comms and are like, sure, that's definitely someone who was here. But it's fine.
Protect each other and show them no mercy. For Sindri!
Oh, you remember Sindri, do you? I thought you'd all forgotten, what with Gunner being the heart of your village now. So it's a yes to Tarek being shirtless again, not because I like looking at his pecs, I already told you I'm a serious person, but because it means he's back in fight mode. And I like the juxtaposition of him being presented in a more primitive way, given his origins. Because even when they mentioned him being a prince, him walking around, cloaked up, abs out, makes you picture more of a Khal Drogo situation. You know, people of the land. So it was a yes to see that his culture is the opposite. They wear too much clothing and are too high up from the land. Anyway, back to the battle. It's a no to all of these people in the Longhouse who aren't helping Nemesis, Sam, and Eris worth a ding-dong damn. All the other groups had weapons. Why doesn't the group that has children with it? Look at these fully bearded men cowering behind a table while a little kid with a little knife is ready to defend Nemesis with his little life. no to Nemesis getting her arm chopped off thanks to their inaction. Though I don't see why that's a problem since she chopped off her arms to wear those gauntlets in the first place. Guess it was too much arm this time. Meanwhile, it's a massive yes to the villagers outside thinking they defeated the soldiers and the soldiers being all hi. But it's a no to Cora telling Gunnar where the elevator is on the King's Gaze and him saying, I got it, be quick. Friend, you don't got it. Unlike Cora, you've never been an Imperium soldier, so you don't know how to pose as one, and you've never been on a dreadnought, so you don't know where you're going. Maybe give Cora an extra second to give you directions, And no to Furiosa opening her mouth in that filthy water. Look at her, just licking it. But kudos to her for nailing one of the mechs right in its butt. With 40 minutes left, we're back on the King's Gaze where Cora sets explosives, then jumps down into a room full of enemies instead of going out the way she came. They alert Command that someone infiltrated the ship, and Noble knows in his hole of holes that it's her, so off he goes to confront her while our crew on the ground is overwhelmed. Titus just stands there slack-jawed, Tarek and Furiosa make a death pact, and it seems like they're all done for. But what's this? Another 10 yeses for the cloaked silhouette standing before them? Granted, Jimmy waited until so many people had died before coming to help, but what can I say? Jimmy is always yes. So we're back on the KG, where it's a yes for a hallway fight, and for me laughing like a horse when Cora stabs a guard with his own blade, then immediately throws it away because it burned her. It felt so real to the moment that it genuinely caught me off guard. Now the battle comes to a head, because with Cora on board, Noble says screw not blasting the village to avoid destroying the grain we need, take those people out, and our men along with them. So it's a yes for how gingerly this guy is turning the wheel to target the surface. It's almost like foreplay. Then Noble and Cora have it out, and this may be blasphemy, but as a lover of swords, I think I prefer the Kryptean blades over lightsabers. Sure, they aren't as practical, but I like the visible heat and the trail of smoke. Now, thankfully, for the sake of my voice, we're getting close to the end, and it's a yes for a cool use of slow-mo that ramps up into something pretty sick. I enjoyed the fight with Noble, even the parts that looked a bit wonky, especially since they incorporated what I felt was missing from their fight in Child of Fire, an external threat they're both utilizing and contending with while worrying about each other. Though I would have liked more fighting on stable ground before they got to that, and I'm on the fence about what ultimately proved to be Noble's demise. Again, Sophia delivered in every second of this film. That line when Gunnar is dying, why can't I just have this one thing? I felt that. So it's a big fat yes for her and what she brought to the table, but it's a big fat no to this lens effect Snyder keeps using. Stop with this funhouse mirror looking bullshit. I don't want it. As for the ending, between the trilogy bait I already saw coming and the arrival of the blood axes that felt like an afterthought, it's a no. But Jimmy's less feral now, and if that's not the best note to end on, I don't know what is. So that was Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver, and I gotta say, I'm torn. In terms of the fleshing out of events, it's better than A Child of Fire, given that Fire felt like a series of shallow vignettes, doing very little with too much. And it's the same for the action and performances, minus Frothy. They were both better in this. But it's worse than A Child of Fire in terms of direction and balance, because the difference between Fire's highs and lows weren't as stark, and I think they were evenly distributed throughout, compared to Scargiver, which had very low lows for what felt like half the runtime, with all the highs smashed together in the end. And it's kind of the opposite of Fire, where it did too much with very little. So I can't decide which one is better, nor do I have to. My gut wants to say A Child of Fire, but I could be biased against the scale of Scargiver, since more happening can lead to more things being wrong, even if they're not any more wrong than the things that happened on a smaller scope. Then again, I was more entertained by Scargiver, in part because of its scale. So for now, I'll call it a tie. What I am certain of is that I don't want a third film, and there's no word that one has been greenlit yet, but they did finish the treatment, so we'll see. As always, my goal at Stream Come True is to share my passion for storytelling and encourage you to dive into all of the amazing and not so amazing content streaming near you. So if you want to watch Rebel Moon, the links are in the box. Thank you so much for watching, subscribe on your way out, and good night, streamers.